Growth rarely announces itself as freedom first. It usually arrives as pressure, a tightening, a sense that life has become harder to move through, even though you're doing everything right. Things that once flowed now resist you. Ease disappears, effort increases. Emotionally, it can feel like frustration, fatigue, or a constant low-grade tension that won't resolve. This isn't because you're failing. It's because you're outgrowing the container you're still in. There is a psychological tension that forms between who you were structured to be and who you're becoming. That tension creates friction, and friction is not punishment. It's how movement begins. Before freedom appears, pressure has to build. You're not being blocked, you're being pushed. This is why the moment right before major change often feels worse, not better. Staying starts to hurt in ways it never did before. What once felt stable now feels draining. Environments that used to hold you begin to exhaust you. Conversations feel heavier. Expectations feel restrictive. Even success can start to feel suffocating. This is the moment when endurance stops being noble and starts being harmful. The mind often tries to frame this as weakness. I should be able to handle this. But something deeper knows the truth. You're no longer meant to handle it. Comfort has quietly turned into confinement, and the cost of staying has surpassed the fear of leaving. You're being pushed because remaining where you are is no longer safe for your growth, even if it still looks safe on the surface. Long before your mind agrees with this, your nervous system usually does. The body is often the first to reject an outdated life. Stress appears without a clear external cause. Exhaustion sets in even when nothing obvious has changed. Anxiety hums in the background, not sharp enough to panic, but persistent enough to wear you down. This isn't malfunction, it's guidance. The body refuses to cooperate with roles, environments, and rhythms that no longer align with who you are becoming. Logic tries to override this. It explains, it minimizes, it tells you to push through. But somatic truth doesn't respond to arguments. The body doesn't care about your reasons. It responds to congruence. When it stops cooperating, it's not betraying you, it's leading you out. As this internal shift deepens, old patterns begin to collapse. Coping mechanisms that once worked lose their power. Distractions stop distracting. Emotional loops stop looping. Repetitive cycles break without effort. This can feel destabilizing because those patterns once provided structure, even if they were unhealthy. Familiar coping strategies create a sense of control. When they disappear, it feels like losing ground. But what's actually happening is that the new version of you can no longer sustain the old patterns. They don't fit your nervous system anymore. And because of that, life begins removing options you've outgrown. Doors close, circumstances shift. Paths that once felt available suddenly aren't. The old identity fights hardest here, because this is the stage where continuation becomes impossible. You're being pushed because the old patterns cannot survive who you are now. This is also why endings at this stage often feel forced. Not chosen consciously, but imposed. Situations unravel, relationships strain, opportunities dissolve, and the mind labels it as bad luck, rejection, or failure. But forced endings are often acts of protection. Life closes doors you refuse to walk away from because staying would require you to betray your own evolution. Protection doesn't always feel gentle. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like being stripped of something you were still attached to. But psychologically, this is how alignment asserts itself when voluntary movement doesn't happen. What feels like rejection may actually be life removing what would eventually harm your future self. The ego, however, doesn't experience this as guidance. It experiences it as failure. Identity resists endings because endings threaten continuity. The ego wants a coherent story where everything makes sense and leads somewhere predictable. When that story collapses, shame often rushes in. You start questioning yourself, blaming yourself, wondering what you did wrong. Self-blame intensifies near breakthroughs because the ego would rather believe you failed than accept that control is being removed. What's crucial to understand here is that pressure is directional. It's not random stress. It has a vector. It pushes you away from what no longer fits and towards something that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. This is why surrender becomes the turning point. Not surrender as collapse, but surrender as acceptance of movement. When you stop fighting the pressure, it transforms. What felt like chaos begins to clarify. You start seeing patterns instead of problems, signals instead of obstacles. Acceptance doesn't mean you like what's happening. It means you recognize that resisting it is costing you more than allowing it. This phase doesn't tell you exactly where you're going. It only tells you where you can no longer stay. And that can feel terrifying if you're used to certainty. But growth doesn't require certainty. It requires honesty. Honesty about what drains you. Honesty about what you're forcing. Honesty about how much effort it now takes to maintain a life that once felt natural. Pressure is not here to break you. It's here to free you from a structure that has done its job. The push you're feeling is not violence against your life. It's life insisting on your growth. As the pressure continues, something important shifts in how you experience it. At first, it feels external, like life is doing something to you. Obstacles appear, situations tighten, options narrow. But over time, if you stop resisting long enough to observe, you may notice that the pressure isn't random. It has precision. It applies force exactly where you've been compensating, enduring, or betraying yourself quietly. It presses on the places where you've been overriding your own signals for the sake of stability, loyalty, or fear. This is why the pressure feels personal, even though it isn't punitive. It's specific. It targets what no longer fits. And the more honestly you look at it, the clearer it becomes that life isn't collapsing everywhere, only where continuation would require you to stay smaller than you are now. This is often when the illusion of control finally begins to crack. You may realize that much of what you called managing your life was actually managing this alignment. You were spending energy holding things together that no longer wanted to be held, explaining yourself, adjusting your expectations, regulating your reactions so the structure wouldn't fall apart. Pressure exposes this because it removes your ability to keep compensating. You get tired in a deeper way. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from pretending. And when that exhaustion sets in, it brings clarity with it. You see that the pressure isn't asking you to try harder. It's asking you to stop propping up what's already unstable. What feels like collapse is often just effort being removed. As effort drops away, fear tends to surge one last time. Not because danger has increased, but because avoidance has ended. You can no longer tell yourself that things will somehow resolve if you just wait longer or push through. The truth becomes unavoidable. Movement is required. This is where the ego resists most intensely, because movement means uncertainty, and uncertainty removes its authority. The ego prefers suffering it can predict over freedom it can't control. So it reframes pressure as threat. It tells you that letting go means losing everything you've built, that starting over means failure, that discomfort is proof you've made a mistake. But these narratives appear precisely when the old structure is no longer viable. Fear spikes not because you're moving in the wrong direction, but because you're approaching a point of no return. What's rarely acknowledged is that this phase requires a different kind of courage than most people expect. Not the courage to leap dramatically, but the courage to stop negotiating with what is clearly ending, to stop trying to extract comfort from a life that has already expired internally, to stop asking for permission to outgrow something that once defined you. This courage feels quiet. It doesn't come with confidence or excitement. It comes with a sober recognition that staying is costing you more than leaving ever could. When that recognition settles, the pressure begins to change texture. It's still there, but it feels less chaotic, more directional. You may not know where you're going yet, but you become very clear about what you're no longer willing to endure. As acceptance deepens, you may notice that life starts cooperating in small, almost invisible ways. Not by making things easy, but by making things obvious. Situations clarify. Conversations reveal their limits. Opportunities either align cleanly or fall away without drama. The noise reduces. This isn't because you've solved everything. It's because you've stopped fighting the signal. Resistance amplifies pressure. Alignment organizes it. The moment you internally agree with what's happening, without needing to like it, the sense of being attacked softens. You stop interpreting every difficulty as a verdict about your worth. You start seeing it as information. Pressure becomes feedback instead of punishment. This is also when self-blame begins to loosen. Earlier, you may have asked yourself what you did wrong to deserve this discomfort. But gradually, another understanding emerges. Nothing went wrong. Something finished. And endings don't always come with celebration or clarity. Sometimes they come with friction, because friction is what creates separation. If the old life ended gently, you might never leave it. If it stayed comfortable, you might never question it. The nervous system plays a crucial role here. As you stop forcing yourself to adapt, the body begins to respond differently. There may still be anxiety, but it changes character. It becomes less about dread and more about anticipation without an object, a readiness without a plan. The body senses movement before the mind has language for it. You may feel moments of unexpected calm even in the middle of uncertainty. Brief windows where you realize that not knowing is less painful than pretending. These moments are important. They show you that safety no longer depends on control. From the outside, this phase can look like stillness or even stagnation, but internally, it's highly active. Values are rearranging, priorities are recalibrating. Identity is loosening from roles that once provided structure but now impose limits. The pressure you felt was never about forcing action for action's sake. It was about breaking identification with a life that could no longer grow with you. You are not being forced out of your old life because you did something wrong. You are being freed because you have outgrown it. And once you understand that, the pressure loses its power to scare you. It becomes what it always was, the force that creates space for a truer life to take shape, one that doesn't require you to fight yourself in order to live it. There is a subtle moment that often goes unnoticed during this phase, where you realize you are no longer negotiating with yourself the way you used to. You stop trying to convince yourself that things will magically become lighter if you endure just a little longer. The inner arguments quiet down, not because everything is resolved, but because something inside you has already accepted the truth. This acceptance doesn't arrive with confidence or excitement. It arrives with calm. A calm that feels unfamiliar if your identity was built around struggle. But this calm is not resignation. It is coherence returning. When the nervous system stops bracing, the psyche no longer needs to justify staying where it hurts. You may still feel uncertainty, but it no longer feels hostile. It feels neutral, open, as if the future is undefined but no longer threatening. This is a critical shift because it marks the moment when survival stops being the primary motivator and alignment quietly takes its place. What follows is not immediate clarity, but an internal reorientation. You begin to notice what no longer demands your energy. Situations that once consumed you emotionally now feel distant. Not because you don't care, but because you no longer identify with them. Identity loosening is rarely dramatic. It happens through disinterest, through the absence of urgency, through the quiet realization that you don't need to prove anything anymore. From the outside, nothing changes, but internally, something fundamental has ended. You are no longer organizing your life around who you were required to be. This is why the pressure eases. The pressure was never about action. It was about identity. Once you stop trying to be who you've already outgrown, the system relaxes. The body exhales. The mind stops rehearsing escape plans. You don't need to know what's next yet. You only need to stop forcing yourself to stay where your growth has already moved on. Eventually, a different kind of confidence begins to form. Not the loud confidence that comes from certainty, but a quiet trust rooted in self-respect. You start trusting your internal signals more than external reassurance. You don't need everything to make sense for you to move with integrity. You become less interested in explaining your choices and more committed to honoring them. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes honest. The tension that once felt unbearable now feels instructive. You recognize it faster. You listen sooner. You don't wait until the body collapses or the mind burns out to acknowledge misalignment. This is how maturity expresses itself. Not through control, but through responsiveness. You respond to life instead of wrestling it into submission. And when movement finally happens, it rarely looks the way you imagined. It doesn't arrive as a dramatic breakthrough or a perfectly timed opportunity. It often comes quietly, through small decisions that feel inevitable rather than forced. A conversation you no longer avoid, a boundary you no longer explain, a door you allow to close without reopening it out of fear. These moments don't feel heroic, they feel natural. That's how you know the transition is real. The old life doesn't collapse, it fades. The new life doesn't announce itself, it integrates. You realize that what you feared losing was never supporting who you are now. And what's emerging doesn't require you to fight yourself to sustain it. This is the deeper truth behind the pressure you experienced. It was never meant to overwhelm you. It was meant to wake you up to a simple fact. You cannot grow and stay the same at the same time. Once that is accepted, the fear loses its grip. The urgency softens. The path ahead may still be unclear, but it no longer feels hostile. You understand, at a nervous system level, that safety does not come from control or familiarity. It comes from alignment. And alignment, once restored, carries you forward with far less resistance than you ever imagined possible.